Happy Friday, Kipsters. All right, so today we're going to be looking at decimals. Remember, decimals are just like fractions as in they're parts of wholes. And we can have a whole number, the decimal point, and then we go into our tenths and our hundredths. So we're going to take a look at this, and remember, if we're adding decimals, we want to make sure that they have the same denominator.
Today we're going to be looking at decimals. So let's start by reviewing those decimal place values. So if we look at the chart on the right, we see that our larger place values are going to be to the left of the decimal point. The smaller place values are to the right, like our tenths and our hundredths. And remember, when we have that decimal point, we always say and when we're reading a number. For example, 462 and 25 hundredths. Then in the second chart, we're reminded that 10 hundredths are equal to 1/10. So there's 10 hundredths in 1/10. Our first problem today says, what is the sum of 8 tenths and 57 hundredths? Express the sum as a decimal. Make sure you read that carefully. Think about what we know about when we add or subtract fractions. What needs to be the same in order to be able to do that? So I start with 8 tenths plus 57 hundredths. I know that I'm adding because it asked me to find the sum, and sum is a keyword for adding. So now, as I begin to get ready to add, I notice that one of my denominators is 10 and the other is 100. So I need to convert my 8 tenths to a denominator of hundredths. So I end up with 80 hundredths. I then add 80 hundredths plus 57 hundredths, and I get 137 hundredths. That means that I have a larger numerator than I have denominator. So within there, I see that 100 hundredths would be 1 whole, and I still have 37 hundredths left. So to write that as a decimal, I have 1 and 37 hundredths. Now let's take a look at problem number 2. It says, find the sum, convert tenths to hundredths as needed, and write your answer as a decimal and a fraction. You see 3 tenths plus 7 hundredths and 16 hundredths plus 5 tenths. The first question asks me to find the sum of 3 tenths plus 7 hundredths. So I first notice that I have 3 tenths and 7 hundredths, and I don't have the same denominator. So I start by finding an equivalent fraction for 3 tenths with a denominator of 100, which would be 30 hundredths. 30 hundredths plus 7 hundredths is equal to 37 hundredths. So there I have my fraction of 37 hundredths, but I also need to show that as a decimal. Since I don't have a full whole, I would have 0 and 37 hundredths as my decimal. Now, the second question asked me to add 16 hundredths plus 5 tenths. Once again, I have to convert my fraction with tenths to hundredths, so I get 50 hundredths. I then add 16 hundredths plus 50 hundredths to get 66 hundredths. 66 hundredths would then also be equivalent to 0 and 66 hundredths.